You've heard the headlines. Florida property taxes are out of control. Homeowners insurance has gone through the roof, and let's not even talk about flood insurance. And Cape Coral specifically keeps showing up in articles about how unaffordable it's getting. And so the question I'm getting from people considering a move down here, the question I get almost every single day is it really as bad as they're saying? And that's what this video is, a real answer to that question with actual numbers, not headlines. Now, some of what you've heard is true, and also some of it is being applied to Cape Coral in a way that's not accurate. And there's a part of this story, a big part, that almost never makes it into those articles. Something that happened in Tallahassee literally a few weeks ago that could change the property tax math for people who buy here in 2026. Now stay with me here, because here's the belief people are arriving with when they find this video. The home prices in Cape Coral look genuinely affordable compared to where they're coming from. But the ongoing costs, the taxes, the insurance, the flood, the maintenance, they've gotten so bad that any savings on the price point gets completely wiped out immediately. Florida was supposed to be the affordable state, but now it doesn't feel that way at all. But here's what's actually true. The costs are real. Insurance has gotten expensive, and flood insurance is a real line item here. Property taxes in Cape Coral aren't necessarily low, and none of that is wrong. But the headlines are telling half of the story. They give you the costs, but they almost never tell you about the protections, the ones that are specifically designed for people who make Cape Coral their primary home. And those protections change the math in a significant way. The people who are overpaying in this market are the ones who didn't know the second half of the conversation. So by the end of this video, you will. Hi, my name's Jamie Kolev, and my husband and I run the Kolev Group. We're full-time real estate agents here in Cape Coral, and we live here as well. So this is not a video I made to sell you on Cape Coral. It's a video I made because I have this conversation so much, and I'd rather you have the full picture before you make any decisions. So here's the plan. We're going to go through every cost category that actually matters: homeowners insurance, flood insurance, property taxes, utilities, and HOA and CDD fees. We're going to talk with real numbers for Cape Coral specifically, and then we're going to go through the protections. We're going to talk about what exists right now for primary residents and what could be coming in November that almost nobody in the relocation conversation is talking about yet. And by the end of this video, you'll have an actual answer to the question. Not a headline, not a fear, but an actual answer, so let's get into it. All right, so let's start with homeowners insurance, because this is the number that consistently shocks people who are relocating from out of state. Florida is the most expensive state in the country for homeowners insurance. That's not a Cape Coral thing, that's a statewide reality. It's driven by hurricane exposure, rebuilding costs, and an insurance market that has been under serious pressure since Ian. Here in Lee County, which is where Cape Coral sits, the average homeowner's premium is approximately $3,600 a year. That was the average of 2025. That's about $300 a month before your mortgage, before flood, and before utilities. And here's the thing, that county average is a blended number. It includes inland homes, low-risk properties, newer builds, Gulf access canal homes, older construction, and properties with aging roofs can run 20 to 50% higher than that on average. Now, if you're looking at new construction, you're going to have impact windows, a hip roof, a concrete block construction. That's your single most powerful lever for controlling insurance costs. It's not just a feature list. It's going to affect a line item on your monthly budget. So why does this matter? Because insurance isn't optional unless you're paying cash. It's not a number you can negotiate away. And if you're budgeting like you're in a Midwest city where a $200,000 home runs $1,200 a year to insure, you're going to be surprised when your Cape Coral quote comes back at 3 times that. Knowing this going in means you can factor it into your purchase price, not discover it once you're under contract and then can't afford your home. Insurance is real, but insurance is only the first surprise. The second one is flood insurance. And this is one almost nobody budgets for at all because they assume it's wrapped up in their same policy. As a relocator myself, I can tell you this is one that catches most people off guard. Flood insurance is not included in your homeowner's policy. And I want to say that clearly because a lot of buyers, including myself when I first started researching Florida, assume that it is. But it is a completely separate policy. It comes from a completely different source, either the National Flood Insurance Program, which is federally backed, or a private carrier. And it is its own line item. In Lee County, the average annual flood insurance cost through the NFIP is approximately $1,120 a year. But remember, that is an average and it can be deeply misleading depending on where your home is. Coming from someone who has all the things going against them, being on a canal, being 1960s, and having been flooded, ours runs about 4 times that amount. So here's the thing I always tell my clients, and it's the most important thing, and I'm going to say this in this section. You cannot talk about flood insurance as one number for Cape Coral because it does not work that way. The city has hundreds of miles of canals, and we have different flood zones right next to each other. So that cost can literally change from one street to the next. In an X flood zone, which is your lower risk, you're typically further away from open water, you might pay $400 to $900 a year. In an AE zone, so higher risk, canal front, closer to open water, you're looking at $1,500 to $5,000 or more. And within AE zone properties, 2 homes on the same street can have very different premiums depending on one thing, and that is their elevation certificate. The elevation certificate is a document completed by a licensed Florida surveyor that tells your insurance company exactly how high your lowest floor sits relative to base flood elevation, or the BFE. And every foot above BFE meaningfully reduces your premium. Every foot below it does the opposite. So here's why this matters when you're comparing homes. The BFE in Cape Coral is not a fixed number for the whole city. It varies by location, typically somewhere in the range of 8 to 12 feet above sea level, depending on where in the city the property sits. So when someone asks me what is the minimum elevation for new construction in Cape Coral, the honest answer is it depends on the BFE for that specific parcel, plus 1 foot of required freeboard. There is no single magic number for the whole city. That's exactly why I can't give you one flood insurance figure and call it accurate for Cape Coral as a whole, and why anyone who does is oversimplifying this. What this means practically is a newer home built 2 or 3 feet above BFE is going to have dramatically lower flood insurance than an older home that was built at or near BFE under older code requirements. This is one of those hidden financial advantages of new construction that nobody really mentions when they're comparing a resale to a new build. But there's one thing that we need to talk about if we're talking about affordability. And this one is actually good news for Cape Coral buyers specifically. Cape Coral holds a Class 5 Community Rating System designation from FEMA. That's a rating the city earned by going above and beyond the minimal flood management standards, so through its canal system infrastructure, stormwater management, and floodplain endorsement. What it means for you as a homeowner, though, a 25% automatic discount on your NFIP flood insurance premium. Most Florida communities sit at a Class 7 or 8, which means a much smaller discount or none at all. Cape Coral's Class 5 is a real financial advantage over comparable Gulf Coast markets that most out-of-state buyers have no idea exist. The city is actually exploring whether it can reach Class 4, which would push that discount to 30%. Now, flood insurance is mandatory if you have a mortgage in a high-risk zone. And even in lower-risk X zones, Citizens Insurance is now requiring flood coverage for more policyholders under a new state law. So this is not optional math regardless of where in Cape Coral you buy. The rule I give every buyer: never finalize an offer on a Cape Coral property without the elevation certificate in hand first, if you can. Quotes without it can come in 30 to 50% below the real number. And never assume 2 homes with the same flood zone designation cost the same to insure. Elevation is what determines your actual premium, and it's specific to that property, not the zone. This is one of the things a good local agent earns their commission on before you ever get under contract. Insurance. Check. We've talked about it. Flood insurance. Check. We've talked about it. Now let's get into property taxes, because this is one where I think a lot of people think they're safe, and they're not. But it's also where the biggest financial opportunity in this video lives, including something that just happened a few weeks ago in Tallahassee. Florida has no state income tax. That is true, and that is not changing. And that genuinely is a major financial benefit for people moving here from high income tax state areas. But here's what that doesn't tell you. Local property taxes in Cape Coral are not low. Cape Coral's median property tax bill is approximately $4,138 a year. That's higher than the Florida state median by about $1,700, and it's above the national median as well. The city's current millage rate is 5.1471 mil, and that's the city portion alone. Add county, school district, and non-ad valorem assessments, things like fire service assessments, lot mowing fees, and solid waste, and your actual tax bill is a combination of multiple line items. But here's a critical distinction that most people don't understand until after they've bought. The tax protections in Florida are built for primary residents, not investors, not second homeowners, not vacation buyers, but residents. So if you're moving here and making this your permanent home, your primary residence, you have access to Florida's Homestead Exemption, which reduces your assessed value by up to $50,000. That saves you roughly $750 a year off your tax bill right out of the gate. You apply for this through the Lee County Property Appraiser before March 1st of the year after you move in. But the exemption is just the start. The more powerful protection is what happens in the year 2 and beyond. And I'll show you that in just a minute. First, this. Something happened in Tallahassee on June 2nd, so just a few weeks ago, that could change the property tax math in Florida in a major way. The Florida legislature passed a constitutional amendment called HJR1F, which has now been renamed to Amendment 3, and it's going to the November 2026 ballot. I'm going to explain exactly what it means, as well as what it means for your timing of your decision to buy. We'll talk about that at the end of the video, but it is worth waiting for. The bottom line on property taxes right now, they're a real number. They're higher than most people expect, and they're structured in a way that rewards primary residents over investors. Knowing that going in means you can build an accurate budget, not an optimistic one. All right, so we've covered the big three that are going to impact your mortgage: your insurance, your flood, and your taxes. Those are the costs that create the biggest surprises. But there are two more that matter for your monthly budget, and they're a lot easier to control if you know what to look for. So let's talk utilities, because people moving from northern states or even western states like Colorado, where I came from, are mentally prepared for high heating bills. We always had them. But they're not prepared for the summer electric bills in Cape Coral. The average monthly electric bill here runs approximately $176 a month. And you're probably thinking, that's really not that bad, but here's the caveat. That's the annual average. In July and August, running your air conditioning around the clock in a Florida home, which, trust me, you will be, even though some people say they won't, that number can be meaningfully higher. And when I mean meaningfully higher, I'm meaning like 3 times higher. In an older home with less insulation and an aging HVAC system, it can be substantially higher. There are real ways to manage this, though, by increasing your insulation, changing out your windows, or potentially going solar or burying a propane tank so you can run on gas. It may sound scary, but it is actually very manageable, and you just have to plan for those high months. Beyond electric, Cape Coral has been raising city water and sewer rates at 11% a year since October of 2024, and those increases are scheduled to continue through 2026. That's city policy, so it's already in the rate schedule, and it needs to be in your budget. So you want to plan on your total monthly utility load in Cape Coral around that range of $300 to $400 a month, depending on your home, your size, and your usage habits. That section may have seemed scary because the numbers can get high during the summer, but they're not the number that surprises people most. Insurance and flood are. But they do belong in the budget, and they're not the number you imagine if you're coming from a city where you barely run your AC. All right, we've got one more cost to cover before we get to the part of this video that I think is going to genuinely change how you think about buying here. And this one is hiding in plain sight of a lot of listings. Most homes in Cape Coral are not in an HOA. That is actually one of the things people love about this city. But we're seeing a lot of newer communities and gated subdivisions, and those come along with HOA fees. And here's the trap. Buyers filter by list price. They find a home at $350,000 and it feels affordable. They don't notice or don't realize that the $400 monthly HOA fee is sitting in the listing details. And that changes the monthly cost of the home significantly compared to comparable property without an HOA. Then we have community developed districts, or CDDs. These are a layer specific to newer master plan communities. They fund the infrastructure of the development, so the roads, amenities, landscaping, and they show up on your property tax bill as a non-ad valorem assessment. So they're not always obvious in the listing, but they're real, and they can add hundreds of dollars a year to your tax bill. Our job as your real estate agent is to make sure we're comparing the full monthly cost of homes, not just the sticker price. Because a $375,000 home with no HOA and no CDD might be a better financial decision than a $350,000 one with fees, depending on your priorities. I mean, HOA and CDD fees aren't inherently bad. They often come with maintained amenities, gated security, and community infrastructure that you're genuinely using. But they have to be in the math every time before you make an offer. Okay, now you have the full cost picture of what you need for your house here in Cape Coral. Insurance, flood, taxes, utilities, HOA, and CDD. That's the honest version of what it costs to own a home in Cape Coral. Now here's the part that flips everything. So let's start with what exists right now. If Cape Coral is going to be your primary residence, so not an investment or a vacation home, you qualify for the Florida Homestead Exemption. I mentioned this before, but here's what it does. It reduces your assessed value by up to $50,000 for the purposes of calculating your property tax. That saves you roughly $750 a year off your bill immediately. The deadline is March 1st of the year following the year that you establish your primary residence. You apply once. It stays with you for as long as you live there. That is layer one. Good, but not the impressive part. The day after you receive your homestead exemption, something called the Save Our Homes cap activates. Here's what it does. It limits how much your assessed value, so the number that is used to calculate your property taxes, can increase each year. The cap is 3% or the change of the consumer price index, whichever is lower. So for 2025, that cap is 2.9%. In a market where home values might be going up 7, 8, 10% in a good year, your taxable assessed value is capped at under 3%. The gap between what your home is worth on the market and what you're being taxed on gets wider every year you own it. Over 5 years, over 10 years, that is a significant compounding financial benefit long-term homeowners accumulate and that investors and short-term buyers never receive. And when you eventually sell and buy another Florida home, you can carry that accumulated benefit with you. It's called portability. You port your Save Our Homes differential to your next Florida homestead. That's layer number 2. Now here's layer number 3, and this one is brand new. On June 2nd, 2026, so literally a couple months ago, the Florida legislature passed a constitutional amendment called HJR 1F. I have done multiple videos on this, so if you're curious, please go check them out. But Governor DeSantis has been pushing this for months. So it's going to go to the Florida voters in November of 2026, and to become law, it needs 60% approval from voters. But here's what it would do if it passes. The current homestead exemption, the $50,000 we just talked about, would increase to $150,000 in 2027, then to $250,000 in 2028. From there, the exemption continues to increase every single year. For many homeowners, this could effectively eliminate the city and county portion of their tax bill if their assessed value is under $250,000. Here's the part that I do want to make mention about, though, and it's the most important thing for relocators to understand about this bill. If it passes in November, there is a 5-year residency rule for new Florida homesteaders. Specifically, if you establish a new homestead in Florida after January 1st, 2027, meaning you move here in 2027 or later, you would receive the current $50,000 tax exemption and would not qualify for the enhanced exemption until you've held Florida homestead for 5 years. But buyers who close on a home and establish their Florida homestead before January 2027, if the amendment passes, they would immediately be eligible for the full enhanced exemption starting in 2027. I do want to make a clarification here because it has come up a lot. You need to be a permanent Florida resident by 2027. That does not mean you have to be owning by 2027, but you have to be a permanent Florida resident by 2027. So what does this mean practically? If you're already considering buying in Cape Coral, the window between now and the end of 2026 is the window where you could establish homestead and potentially be grandfathered into the full benefit if voters approve it. Now, I'm not telling you to rush into a bad purchase. I'm telling you this is a timing variable that is worth understanding as you make your decision. Now, if the timing of HJR 1F, now Amendment 3, matters to your decision, whether that's the homesteaded window, the property tax map, or just understanding what your real monthly cost of ownership looks like on a specific home, we filled out a free property tax simulator at thekolevgroup.com/tax where you can run your own numbers. And if you want to talk through your specific situation, book a call with us. Our information is in the description and we would love to help you through it. All right, let's bring this home because you came into this video asking whether Cape Coral is actually affordable to live in. And here's what you now know that most people don't find out until after they've moved in. Homeowners insurance in Lee County averages around $3,600 a year. And the type and age of your home matters a lot. Flood insurance is a completely separate policy, and where your home sits on the flood zone map is one of the most important variables in your budget. Property taxes in Cape Coral run above state and national median. But primary residents have access to protections that investors never receive. Utilities are real, especially in our hot summers, so just make sure you budget for them. And of course, always check out for those HOA and CDD fees. The reason you were uncertain wasn't that Cape Coral is expensive, it's that nobody had given you the full picture, and hopefully now you have it. So here's what I want you to walk away with. The buyers who struggle financially in Cape Coral are the ones who budgeted like they were still in their old city. The buyers who thrive here are the ones who understood the full cost picture going in, and then they use the protections the system offers to their advantage. The Homestead Exemption, the Save Our Homes cap, choosing the right flood zone, choosing the right construction type, and potentially, if November goes a certain way, locking in homestead eligibility before the window closes. None of that is complicated, it's just great information, and now you have it. If you're in active decision mode, like if you're actively looking at properties, running timelines, thinking about 2026 or early 2027, let's talk, because the homestead question thing alone is worth a 30-minute conversation. Our contact information is in the description below. And if you're still in research mode, that's exactly where our free Cape Coral relocation guide lives. It covers everything you need to know about Cape Coral and gives you a full picture of what life actually looks like here. You can find it at the link in the description below. I'm Jamie Kolev, and if Cape Coral is on your radar, I want to make sure you have the real information that you need before you make any decisions, and that's why this channel is here. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.